Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I'm your host, Michael Voss. Dragon in the Southern Tier. It is Thursday, January 26th. It's about 10:30 at night, and I was just scrolling through some of the news, kind of finishing up my night, when I ran into something that I thought was interesting. A story that I saw, and I think you may have seen it as well, about non-citizens voting in Vermont. In Vermont, it is now okay for non-citizens to be able to vote. And that was kind of interesting because it made me start to remember the schizophrenia of the Democratic Party. Because there's the question of voter suppression, a big taboo subject on the internet, and this video will probably be suppressed because of it, but also because of what we've heard about black voters, because of what they have done in the past. And it doesn't quite make sense. I'm going to walk you through some of the things I'm talking about. But first, I do want to mention, if this is the first time you're seeing our channel, we want to welcome you and thank you for being part of our audience. We want you to know we do long-form political commentary, and every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream with you. We reach out every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. to hear your voice from anywhere in the world about the issues that matter to you. It's because we believe in the First Amendment. It's not just an American value, it's a value for the world. And whether it's through your chats, your tweets, or your phone calls, we want to hear what you have to say about the things that are affecting us all across the world. We hope to see you this Sunday as well. With that said, let's take a look at this. Oh man, where to start? So, in Vermont, they have just said it's okay and it is perfectly legal for non-citizens to be able to vote. That means illegal aliens. And I have to say, why would we want non-citizens voting in elections? What's the reason why we would give for non-citizens to vote? Now, the answer that we often hear from the far left is, well, they're in America, so they should have the right to vote because they're in our country. And somehow that conveys a reason for them to be able to vote and change our governments, change our laws, that they can take advantage of the American system. Does that make this sense to anyone? Somebody comes to America, they're vacationing, they came in illegally, maybe they're legal, and they get to change the law because they want something, because it's a benefit to them. And Democrats say, well, that's perfectly fine. That seems to be voter nullification. That seems to eliminate the very people in America who are trying to run their own governments to make sure they have good representation. You're eliminating those votes by adding votes of people who don't care. They have an agenda. They have an objective. And it kind of makes me think about the schizophrenia of Democrats overall, because I know most people don't remember this. In 2008, it was the Democrats and the progressives who were saying, well, there's already non-citizens that are voting in our elections. Somewhere between 1 and 11% of votes that we are seeing across the country are coming from non-citizens. They're already involved. Now, that's because in part we've seen in California and New York State, a couple of states, where they have passed legislation that says if you go for a driver's license, you're automatically put on voting rolls. We have seen in many states where individuals who have no reason to be on voting rolls still continue to be there. They moved out of state, they died, they changed locations, lots of reasons. So we've seen this. And I'm not saying that any particular election is or is not verified or perfectly sound or the safest, most secure election that has ever occurred. I'm not trying to say that. Mostly because YouTube would shut down the channel if I did. What I'm saying is we know that there is a question that has been documented by Harvard, that has been mentioned by progressives themselves, that elections seem to have some issues going back to 2008. And they continue to make these statements now, that non-citizens are in fact voting. The number is unknown on the exact number of how many of these cases are happening, but we know it is happening to some degree. And that seems to be voter nullification. And now in Vermont, we are seeing the Democrats are saying, no, we want more of that nullification, not less. We want more people who are non-citizens voting at the local, possibly state and federal level. Because if they go in to vote, the election day isn't different for local, state, and federal. And many of the documents, the state voting forms, are all the same on the local, state, and federal level. It's one ballot. You're not having 3 separate ballots. So these people are potentially able to vote in every kind of election, which would nullify the votes of American citizens. Maybe I'm using too much logic here. I don't know. But these are the same Democrats that had the schizophrenia, not only in 2008 when they admitted that non-citizens are voting in elections, but also in 2019, I remember, or was it 2020, about 3 years ago, when we heard Democrats saying, well, people who are 16 should be allowed to vote. Remember, it was the Democrats, the progressives, who said we have to lower the voting age. 16-year-olds should be involved in the voting process. Mind you, they also say 16-year-olds are not smart enough or responsible enough to own a firearm. That 16-year-olds aren't responsible enough or capable enough to be able to drink or drive or join the military or go to work. But they're responsible enough to be able to change their gender, and they're responsible enough to be able to vote in elections. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Again, that's schizophrenic. You're going to the extremes, and what seems to be the common through line? Well, Democrats and progressives are hoping to get more and more votes. Younger people are easier to manipulate. It's one of the reasons why we have so many laws protecting the young, because they're easy to manipulate. That's why you can't make certain types of commercials targeting young people, because you can manipulate them. They are innocent and naive. They don't understand the consequences of what they do. But yet Democrats are okay with being able to do that same kind of manipulation in our schools and in voting, which would nullify pre-existing voters. Again, more voter nullification, taking away votes from older people who do know better and have more of an understanding of consequences of the legislation. It doesn't end there, because we're told, well, you got to remember, it's about black voters. It's about voter nullification of blacks. They're being suppressed. It's horrible. It's terrible that they can't vote. Except when you actually look at the data, state by state, over and over again across this country, black voters are registered at almost the same kind of rates as whites or Hispanics or Asians. It's not a question of can they register to vote. They do. And it's not a question of the ease of the vote. I mean, everyone can go out, and we've seen that they have mail-in voting, early voting, extended hours of voting, state by state by state. So black people are able to vote as easily everywhere in America as anyone else. The question is, do they want to vote? Do they really want to come out and actually be involved in the voting process? Does anyone really want to be involved in the voting process? And sometimes we see a spike in that, sometimes we don't, but we see consistently no one's being turned away. Black, white, Hispanic, no one's being turned away from being able to vote overall. So what's the problem here? Well, blacks aren't voting the way the Democrats want. There are just not enough of them voting, and not enough of them voting for the candidates that are being presented by the progressive movement. Hakeem Jeffries may be black, and he's definitely a progressive, but there's not enough Hakeem Jeffries in Congress at this moment to satisfy the progressive movement. And so they have to do something to get more progressives in, to get more Democrats in for a longer period of time, apparently. And so one of the answers is, well, let's get younger kids to vote, because their school teachers, who are by and large progressive and left-leaning, are already on board, and they're indoctrinating our children with critical race theory. But that should make it very easy for them to turn into Democratic voters, even before they understand the consequences of what it means to be a Democratic voter or to push through these progressive ideals. That's kind of scary to me. And it just doesn't stop being scary. There's so many consequences to this. One of them being that, again, if you're adding in non-citizens to be able to vote, and we are seeing that they have been adding non-citizens consistently, even though it's illegal, even though states have stopped that since about the 1800s. I believe the last state that allowed non-citizens to vote was in 1926. And we hear Democrats all the time, like in the AP, saying, well, it's a minuscule number, it's almost non-existent, except they're saying it does exist. They're trying to tell us, well, out of millions of people, maybe there's only 2,000, or maybe there's only 1%, or maybe there's only 11%. The numbers keep changing on how many non-citizens are voting, but they're voting. And this is the data that's coming from the left, from Harvard. This is the data that's coming from the progressive movements themselves. They're telling us they're voting, which means whether it's one vote or 1 million votes, that means that's voter suppression. It's voter nullification. It means that black vote means less. It means that Hispanic, that Asian, that white vote means that much less. Women's votes are worth that much less. Gay, lesbian, LGBTQAI plus, you're a toaster. It means your vote is less because there's someone else who shouldn't be voting, who's not part of our country, who doesn't have our best interests at heart necessarily, is also voting. Now, you may say to me, Mike, well, how do you know the best interest of Americans isn't being expressed by these non-citizens? Well, I'll make it easy for you. Let's think about New York City. Now, New York City decided that they were going to allow 800,000 non-citizens, mostly illegal aliens, to be able to vote in elections, even though they'd be voting supposedly only on city elections, local elections, but there was no way to stop them from voting from state or federal elections. It's all the same election form. And of course, thank God, a judge said, no, that's just not going to work because there's no way to differentiate between this non-citizen voting in all of our elections and voting in a local election. And they don't have a right to vote in our elections, local, state, or federal, by Constitution of New York State and the United States government. They don't have the right. They're not citizens. So for these two reasons, they can't vote. Democrats were upset about that. And they say, well, they should be voting. And I have to say, well, why would the illegal aliens be voting? It's because in New York State, both former disgraced Governor Andrew Cuomo and Kathy Hochul decided to give them checks. Remember, they were getting checks of $17,600 apiece because of the pandemic. That they get right now, what is it that we're seeing from the practical progressive mayor of New York, Eric Adams? He wants to get $1 billion of United States citizens' taxes to be able to spend on illegal aliens in New York City, to spend $60,000 per illegal alien in New York City, to give them a quality of life of double the average citizen, not only in New York, but around the country, so that they can live in hotels where their services, all the workers in the hotel will provide them food and clean their rooms. That no one's going to do for you in your house. No one's going to pay for your bills, come over and clean your apartment. No one's going to pay you double your salary just to be in America, just to be in New York City or New York State. But that's what he wants to do. And we've seen that documented. Gee, who wouldn't want to do that? Let's say you came from a third world nation. I don't know, maybe you came from Haiti. Maybe you came from Venezuela. Maybe you came from North Korea. I don't know. But you came to the United States for the first part because you get freedom. Two, you get a better quality of life, massively more than any other country that you're coming to America from. And now they're going to pay you more than American citizens earn to live in a hotel, to have a higher quality of life than you've ever had in your entire life in your home country. Would you vote for that? Would you vote for Kathy Hochul to give you more money? Would you vote for Eric Adams to give you more money and to let you live a higher quality of life? And does that throw off the numbers because maybe other people in New York don't want to spend their taxes that way? Maybe other people in the United States don't want our tax dollars to go to that. But yet, that's nullifying your vote. Whether it's 1%, again, whether it's 1% or 11% or somewhere in between, we're seeing in city after city that we're seeing more and more of these non-citizens are allowed to vote, and they have a different agenda. They gain a different benefit. Now, I pointed out it's New York City, but it's not the only one, because there's also San Francisco. We know that in San Francisco, they were doing the exact same thing. They were letting non-citizens vote in elections. And that's a problem as well. And they were very proud of the fact that they were letting non-citizens vote in their local elections, possibly also state and federal elections, nullifying the votes of the people in the city itself, the American citizens who are paying the taxes, who are paying for everything. That's not fair. That's schizophrenic. It's in violation of the very things that we hear from the Democrats themselves as they tell us, well, no, we want to make sure people can vote. And I remind you, again, that it was the NAACP, I have that here somewhere, the NAACP who were complaining themselves that there's a problem with black people voting, even though there isn't, but they want to claim that there's voter suppression, there's voter nullification, and they're blaming it on Republicans, but non-citizens voting is nullifying black votes. That's in New York City, that's in San Francisco, that's in Vermont, like I said and showed you before. We know that's happening in Vermont right now, so that's a fact. And even in Connecticut. In Connecticut right now, we can see that there was a recent bill that's been proposed just in the last day or two, that in Connecticut, they want to give non-citizens the right to be able to vote. It's just that simple. You're from somewhere else in the world. You're not an American citizen. You're not necessarily paying into taxes. You may not even be here legally, but you get to change the law and help to promote laws that will benefit you at the expense of American citizens. How is that not voter nullification? How is that not schizophrenic based on the values that we hear from the Democrats themselves, the progressives themselves, that say they want more minority voting, but they don't want American voting, they want foreign voting. Because those foreigners are getting a benefit. They're gaining something by this. It's literally buying votes. I mean, quite literally, they are buying the votes of foreigners to get power. I saw that and I said, so in Vermont, in Connecticut, San Francisco, New York, wait a minute, these are some of the biggest cities, some of the most democratic, bluer than blue states. We're seeing a movement in these large centers of population trying to just dilute votes, to nullify votes, especially of women, of blacks, of the poor, Hispanics, Asians. Why are we letting this happen? Why have they been doing this? And this is something long term, because going back to 2008, according to Harvard study, 61,000 people, there's up to 11%. Up to 11% of the people who are voting aren't citizens. Imagine, that's 11% of black voters just wiped out, don't exist, don't matter. Imagine, that's 11% of Hispanics, 11% of women, LGBTQAI+. And if you are part of the LGBTQAI+ toaster movement, remember, you don't have 11% of the population. That's just the reality. You're not. And so you're definitely being nullified by these illegal aliens, these non-citizens, who most of their countries and most of their cultures don't believe in LGBTAIQ+ toaster multi-genders. They don't believe in that. That's why we're spending $200 million in Pakistan trying to convince them of gender studies, of LGBTQ and intersectionality. They don't believe in that. They don't believe in that in India. They don't believe that in the Middle East. They definitely don't believe that in Africa and most of South America. We're spending hundreds of millions of dollars, your tax dollars, to try and change these foreign cultures. The very same people who are telling us that we have to respect cultures and we can't appropriate those cultures, that we can't influence those cultures because that's evil and bad, but we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars to do exactly that. And now we have those people from those cultures that don't agree with modern progressive theory that are coming into America for the money and for the influence and the benefit, and Democrats are bowing to them saying, hey, no problem, just vote for us and keep us in power. It's counterproductive. It doesn't make sense. It's twisted logic. I mean, that's the way I see this over and over again. And at the end of the day, we've seen those very same progressives, those very same Democrats that have come out and said, oh, we have to help illegal immigrants today. They're saying, oh, we have to have non-citizens and illegal aliens be able to vote in our elections, even if they break our law, even if they have a benefit for themselves and they have no interest in what's going on in America. No, we have to help those very same people. But remember, it was just a couple of years ago that they were talking about black voters. And even though they were completely wrong, now we see in 2023, when no major elections on the line, they're throwing them under a bus. Remember, it was just about 3-4 years ago that they were trying to get 16-year-olds to vote. Now they threw them under a bus. It's amazing how the Democrats and the progressives can compartmentalize who they're going to help, when they're going to help them, and how long they stand behind them before they throw them under a bus. I mean, it is equity in action. I mean, equity is the priority of different groups of people based on their political gain at any given moment. It is the most unequal and most biased system that you could possibly think of. And it's not just bias and prejudice in life, it's in politics too in terms of voting. They're more than happy to nullify the very same people's votes that they complain about trying to protect, and they're willing to do it because it means they maintain more power. I don't know. It seems very unfair to me. It seems very dishonest to me. And it troubles me. It doesn't seem to. It troubles me that we are seeing America diluted. Not because of the mix of cultures and mix of people of different colors, because we've always had that. We are the melting pot. We've always been the melting pot. And that's part of the experience I've had for the last 55 years. That's not a problem. I don't care about that. But there was something special about being an American citizen. There was something special about knowing that you could vote and that you were voting in the most free nation in the world. It's one of the key points that so many naturalized citizens value, is to become an American and to be able to be involved in the voting system, where in many of their countries, they don't get to vote. I mean, think of all the socialist nations out there. North Korea, China, the former Soviet Union, Cuba, Venezuela. You don't get to vote. You don't get, there is an election. You have a dead guy, and then you have the guy who's in power. And your choice is, do you vote for the dead guy or the guy who's alive and in power? And by the way, if you vote for the dead guy, someone's going to knock on your door and talk to you about that vote and go, yeah, we know who you are. Is that really an election? How about in some of these countries, third world nations, where you have literally armed guards with guns standing right over you as you're doing your election? How many times have we seen invalid elections because of the various guerrilla groups that are managing and quote unquote protecting the vote? So we're seeing that same kind of thing here in America, except without guns, except if you're talking about the Black Panthers, because they show up with weapons at our voting facilities, the polling places. They've done that. We've seen that consistently. We have the video of that. So there is voter intimidation. We saw that here in New York State, where we had members of the Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow and the far left going out for Leah Webb in the New York State Senate race for the 52nd District, where they were going around and intimidating voters as they were going to polling places. We reported on that. So you do have the same kind of violent intimidation going on from the left, and now they're trying to nullify those very same votes. You know, I always wonder, you're a black voter, you're a Hispanic voter, a female, and you're voting Democrat because you think they're standing up for you. You think they're going to protect your best interest. And yet, as you're going to vote, they're telling you to your face, your vote doesn't matter. There's not enough of you. You're not voting consistently Democrat enough, so they're going to replace you with illegal aliens and non-citizens because they're cheaper and easier to get to vote Democrat. They're nullifying your vote. And yet you're going to vote Democrat anyway? I don't understand it. But I do know this. This is a problem for America. The more we see this happening across this nation, the more we're going to see foreign countries influence our elections. And I don't just mean like 2020, 2018, with Russia being involved in our elections by putting up ads on Facebook. No. I mean, we're going to see countries having people suddenly go on vacations 3-6 months before an election, leave the people here, and they're going to go register to vote because it's legal for them as non-citizens to vote in our elections and to change our economy, change our government, change the people who are in government to the benefit of that foreign country. Now, you can tell me, Mike, you're just saying that that's something you're coming up with. There's no evidence of that. Yeah, but you can't prove them wrong either. And it is a logical consequence. It is something that is quite possible. And that reality is becoming more and more apparent and more of a problem as we go, as more and more places like Vermont, like California, like New York, like so many places are allowing non-citizens to vote. Other countries are voting in our elections, which means your vote means less and less. And Democrats are doing it to the very same people they say they're trying to protect: blacks, Hispanics, and women, and LGBTQ. I don't know. Maybe I got it wrong. Maybe you think that illegal aliens and non-citizens deserve to be able to vote in the same election you do, that they get to put in their values from their country here in America, and you have to live by it. And if that's the case, I really am worried for women. I'm worried about LGBTQAI+. I'm worried about various religions because, unlike in America, other countries in the world don't value the differences out there. And they're bringing that viewpoint, that ideology into the election booth. And it's affecting you more and more, year by year, city by city, state by state, under the banner of progressives. Tell me, how do you feel about that? I look forward to hearing your answer. Thank you.